Rose and Jeffrey, it's very nice to see you guys again. How are you doing?
Good morning. I'm doing okay. I was at Donnacona in Quebec yesterday, and it was extremely hot. Now
Yeah.
I'm back in Toronto, and it is still extremely hot, but a little less hot.
How is and it's really nice to be back. How is Donnacona?
Hot. It was predominantly hot, but quiet. It's always very quiet when I go there.
It is
Um,
very quiet right now because of how they're operating.
Yeah, it's there's quite a bit going on there, none of which I see. I see surprisingly little of, I think of all the prisons I've been to in Canada, I see the least there in terms of the physical infrastructure. It's a very short walk to the actual meeting room for lawyers, unlike Millhaven, for instance. So I've seen very little of Donnacona despite being there a number of times.
That's interesting. Well, it's a very colorful place right now. There's a lot going on. I've actually been on the receiving end of, I think, what I would call whistleblower emails. They tend to be CC'd out to MPs and media, and just speaking to everything that's challenging there.
hmm I you have to find humor in this line of business where you can, I suppose, and often it's dark. And I
Yeah.
remarked to the client yesterday, I was glad that we were able to meet and he wasn't incapacitated, which is always a concern when you go to Donnacona these days.
100%. Um, it's that's actually interesting and a point of discussion because we have this kind of like tinderbox in our prisons right now, where in many provinces and territory, including federally, we're really seeing a lot of violence. And I don't know, to me, it feels like more violence than ever before, but it might not be. I'm thinking, between the quadruple bunking, all the stresses and strains that are going on, and then you can see it across justice, like what's happening with police, even the response to the police deaths. Um, it's almost like justice is something's up, and then it's having collateral consequences on all the peripheral organizations. But I think you guys would also say you can see it in the courts.
Mm.
How so? What do you mean by that?
Well, courts are different. You guys will know more in Ontario. I only know here. But here we have a lot of problems. Like we have delayed trials, we have huge
Oh,
backlog.
yeah.
And then there's also, there's more need for sheriffs, more, it's just challenging. And we all know, most assaults happen in the transportation to the courthouse. So I find the different arms of justice all seem to be strained in many ways, almost like an implosion. And I don't know what we're supposed to do there.
Well, I mean, that's the issue, right? Like it seems like we hear more and more about issues and problems going on, including before we started recording, we were talking about how there was this big problem, the data breach problem in Lindsay that caused a 2 week lockdown. There isn't enough information about it yet. We're not aware of more other than there was this very long lockdown. And it just seems like it's not getting uh, things are not getting better in the jails and it's spreading, especially in Ontario. But that's why we're trying to have these conversations to keep this topic alive, just so that we can raise awareness as to how bad the situation is. It's not getting better, and people should care. One of the reasons why people should care, if the public doesn't care about people who are charged with criminal offenses, they should maybe care about their families because they also get impacted. And this is one of the things that's why I wanted to have this discussion with you guys again today. And thank you for returning to the show. It's because when a person is in jail, it's not just that person who's affected, but it's also their whole like family structure, their close their friends, their relatives. And that's one of the things that we wanted to talk about. Jeff, I know you also do family law. So you're in a perfect position to talk about how much this impacts not just the person who's accused, But the people that are close to them, and Rose, I know you do research just about jails in general. So I want to hear what both of you have to say about the impact of jail beyond the person who's accused or who's in custody.
So I started my career doing family law, and it was interesting at first because it was interesting to be a lawyer at first. But then, you're doing the same stuff all the time, and the novelty of being a lawyer wore off. And what I realized in, I think over the course of a career, you realize different things about your career. You grow. But what I realized is I'm not really interested in being a lawyer in and of being a lawyer unto itself. Um, and I wasn't really interested in family law. What I was interested in was relationships of power that are mediated by the law. So I started doing prison law. People have different reasons for doing anything in their career. Many people in this field have some sort of relationship to prisons, whether as a family member or, as a part of their life or whatever. For me, it was just this is like a really naked application of power
Mhm.
because there you have the huge, huge, huge state against, like I call him the little guy in the relationship, but against the little guy. Um, so
Yeah, it's a
that's
David and Goliath kind of
precise,
situation. Yeah.
yeah. So that's what interests me. And again, it's not really the law that interests me, it's the relationship that interests me. So, I stopped doing family law many, many, not, years ago. Um, but I started doing a case this past fall or winter at Grand Valley, which is the women's prison in Ontario. And what happened there is a man hopped over the fence and broke into the prison and terrorized and traumatized the women. Um, and so I spent a lot of time there meeting with the women. Most of my clients to date have been men because there's simply just more male prisoners than female
Yes.
prisoners. Um, so I was kind of, ignorant towards the issues that female prisoners face. In my meetings with them, I learned really two things, which I probably should have known, and if I turned my mind to it, I would have known. But one, enormous trauma from men. I don't think, if I talked to 100 women, just throwing out a number, 99 of them would have had, a heartbreaking story to tell you about something that a man has done to them.
Mhm.
So, significant intimate partner violence. But what was really interesting was a need for family law services, which again is something that I should have known or realized. You don't stop being a parent just because you have a criminal conviction. So I kept hearing that there was this need for family law service, and I thought,
In the
that
prison, right?
in the
In the
prison,
prison,
yeah.
yeah.
And so that I thought was, wow, this is really interesting because you think about, or at least I think about, the bad people out there doing all sorts of bad things and going to prison. And of course, I'm speaking in narratives here, and not, I don't actually think people are bad people, but I'm speaking in narratives. Um, but you don't stop being a parent. And so it's a really interesting situation where, again, law is mediating a relationship of power.
Mhm.
So I don't have a family law client yet. I, I think that I probably will get a client or two before long, and I'm really keen on looking at how parenting issues are dealt with in that particular context.
Rose, you tell us.
It's interesting. So I worry. I think one of the most severe forms of human suffering that we see in the prisons is the harm through which people, like the alienation, the missing their kids, they're missing
Mhm.
those years of life, which they can never get back. And it's weird because why are we, like, we literally end up punishing families. We punish children for parents. I was actually just reading on a ruling. I think it was in Ottawa where a man had killed a 7 week old baby. Do you guys know what I'm talking about?
I
Mhm.
saw the
And the
headline. Yeah.
court, yeah, pardon me, Jeff?
I just saw the headline.
Well, I was reading it. The judge actually ordered that he cannot have access to his 3 other children. So, It's just a complicated case, and all these people wrote in support of him, but it didn't matter. So it's interesting because we all know that taking children away from parents is not good for anybody. The Juvenile Delinquents Act, 60 Scoop, all these kind of things. But our family law practices also do that, and prison inherently does that. And you see it. Like, I think that's part of that moral labor that goes with working in there because it's violating to even witness and to see the harm and to see the hurt. And I always think also about the parents whose children are incarcerated. So when you have incarcerated youth, what do we do to ease the stress for those parents? Do we do anything at all? And like I'm thinking about it, like parents, they want to even know who their kids are hanging out with. They're not going to feel comfortable knowing their kids are hanging out with other people with convictions, which here or there, but like, why can't they have, socials for the parents to meet each other or information packages? Or maybe just one of the projects I want to do is just really talking to parents and talking to the kid and seeing what would, not all of it, obviously, but what do those parents need to reduce a bit of the harms of
Mhm.
that separation? And then what do those kids need to maintain that connection? And that can be moved right into the federal system or any system with adults where, what do those incarcerated parents require? What do they need? What can help ease that harm? And what do
And,
their kids need?
and communication is very difficult between people who are incarcerated and their families. I mean, they do have visits, but as we know, like it's not easy. First, you have to register their names, right, on lists. You have to get approval, and then if there's a lockdown, it doesn't matter if you have an appointment booked, everything gets canceled. So, I mean, that's one of the problems, but there are many more problems because, as both of you mentioned, there's the relationship between the accused and the person who's the inmate and their parents, but there's also with their children and their spouses. So that's a different dynamic as well. So let's talk a little bit more about that, just so that people are aware of how much this is really disruptive of family units.
So what over my career in I guess you'd call it the personal injury side of my practice in which
Yeah.
I sue prison administrators. I've been in touch with, more parents than I can count, who contact me and say, my kid is going through this or that, or, whatever the situation may be. And this is particularly the case in wrongful death cases. And, if you have one wrongful death case, you've had one too many, and I have quite a few more than one. Um, one comes to mind now where the deceased's criminal record was, as long as my arm. So to be intentionally reductive, we're talking about a bad guy here, right? That's the way that we, would look at this person. But then
Mhm.
you actually talk to the parents. You talk to this mother, and she's his mother. He was his son. He was her
Mhm.
son. Uh, she loved him. She's devastated by the loss of this person. So it's more complicated than someone's criminal record. It's a human being, and what I've always found interesting about my practice is finding the humanity in someone, in anyone, and someone I disagree with, and someone who I can't comprehend what they did and
Yeah.
why they did it. Um, I've always wanted to challenge myself to find the humanity in that person because I think it's really, I think it's the easiest thing you can do is write someone off. Um, and it certainly is eye-opening, but it's not something that we see as members of the public is this, I guess, silent suffering by parents of people inside, particularly
Yeah.
where their loved one has died or been injured. And I think there's very little appetite for anyone to care about that because of the narrative of you are relevant insofar as you have a criminal record.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything you're saying. It's a really, really vulnerable space. And it also becomes really complicated because many individuals are incarcerated because of things that occur within that family unit as well.
Yes.
And that creates a new variant of strain and stress. And it's actually interesting because one of the things when I was doing some work and talking to incarcerated women, particularly women who had, and I think Jeff, we've talked about this before, but women who have killed their children. And it was really complicated because I guess I'll summarize this ongoing story I kept hearing. You have intimate partner violence, you have a really bad domestic relationship, you have a family of a spouse who's also part of the violence, and they don't know what to do, and they think the only way out is death, but they don't want to leave their child in the hands of the other person, and that because they feel concerned. So, what I learned is it's often murder suicide with an unsuccessful suicide.
Mm.
And then comes a long period on like suicide watch,
Hmm.
and then another long period on, suicide watch in a prison, first probably in many had experienced on the forensic units in hospitals, and then many experience that and they find a way forward. But when you look at that, like there's so many dynamics at play
Mhm.
within these families because their causes and their consequences. That's a really difficult space. And I think, Jeff, what you were saying about providing that legal support for the people who are incarcerated, it's so important because I don't think the system fully understands many elements of intimate partner violence or the relationship between, cause, consequence, effect, latent and manifest, right?
Hmm. And this, to my mind, takes us back to sentencing. And I think that sentencing uh, is the great decontextualization of someone's life. And I think that we make some effort to contextualize someone's life through, for instance, a Gladue report or
Yeah.
a pre-sentence report.
Mhm.
Um, but that goes back to the conversation we were having at the very beginning, which is that often despite everyone's best intentions, these reports are not, I would happy to be, corrected on this if I am incorrect. But in my experience, often these reports are not produced with the investigative care that they perhaps ought to, which is not a reflection on the author, but is a reflection on the strain that the authors are under, given the volume of work. Um, so, at sentencing, we have very complicated people's lives that are decontextualized, and our efforts to contextualize them are not, they don't go as far as they ought to go. And are they really relevant in the end when the destination is a prison, and the only question is how long, not what service are you going to get, what is the sentence actually going to do, but how long?
Yeah, and that's an interesting point because we never actually discuss at sentencing the services that they will be getting. That doesn't even, I think, occur to anyone. Like it's just
Because
how
there
long.
aren't many.
Yeah. Uh, and that's the other problem is that there's no guarantee actually. And we talked about that, about whether they will be getting the services if they are available. And not every prison is equipped with the same types of services. So that's also another injustice, is that it also depends on where you're going to end up serving your sentence. If you're lucky, you have some programs and you have you can get on the list and you can have access to them. So it's a yeah, Jeff,
It,
sorry.
it- yeah, I mean, it's a bit farcical. at sentencing because you have a discussion about rehabilitation, denunciation, and deterrence. Almost, almost never is there evidence of what rehabilitation this person needs in concrete terms and what rehabilitation this person is going to get. So it's just a word. But worse than that is denunciation and deterrence. I did a sentencing last week when I said, the Crown was going on, as is their job, about denunciation and deterrence. And I was like, what is the denunciation and when is it happening here? Same with deterrence. No one is in this courtroom. When does the denunciation happen? Is it going to happen when he gets to the pen and is surrounded by, peers who are also uh, denunciated or whatever the word is?
That's
Like when
that's
is this? They're on the same moral playing field.
That's
What
a
is the
really good
denunciation?
point. I mean, if it's a high profile case and everybody's watching, people are going to know what's going to happen. But that's really a good point, Jeffrey, because it is true. Most of the cases that we have, nobody's there, nobody's listening, and nobody cares, quite
Yeah.
frankly. Nobody cares.
No, only if it's high profile does anyone care.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And but the I think the better question I asked on that occasion was, and this is, particular to Ontario, you have people who are in, Justice Brock Jones in a decision called Bassey describes the
Yeah.
prison conditions
Really
as an
good decision.
ongoing
Yeah.
human rights crisis. So I cited that decision. I said, okay, so we have a judge and many judges saying there's a human rights crisis. Is that the denunciation and deterrence? Why is that not denunciatory? Why does the denunciation only start at the sentence? Um,
Agreed?
in my questions, quite properly by the judge, were dismissed as academic. I say quite properly because that's not our job in the courtroom to really think about these things, but to apply them. Um, we did have an interesting back and forth with them.
Yeah. It's interesting, like in this province, Newfoundland and Labrador, we have zero programs in our prisons, right? So often, and people, I agree, should never extend a sentence for programs, but people will sentence to 2 years in hopes to get into federal programming. People will ask for federal.
Yeah, same here. I
Yeah.
recently did a sentencing where um, uh, the individual in question wanted uh, X. We had to do a whole calculation. He needed X number of days to get into the federal system just to get out of the Ontario provincial system because I mean, for a variety of reasons, but for the first time in my career, he'd been quadruple bunked.
And I heard
I've
that
never seen
that's,
that.
and I heard that this happened also in Lindsay. I do have a client who told me that they were four in a cell, and that was the first time because I've heard rumors of four in a cell, but I never actually had a client who did say they were four in a cell. Three is common. I think three
Yeah.
is the
Yeah, I've seen
standard
three
now,
lots.
and I'm going to get to that point as well. But Lindsay apparently just recently they were actually four in a cell, so I know that this is happening now. It's not just a rumor; it is happening. But the problem here that I find the danger is three in a cell has become a norm now that it doesn't even shock judges anymore. So now if we say at sentencing they were three in a cell, I just feel like it doesn't have any kind of impact. It doesn't shock the judges. They're like,
It's
yeah,
the new
it's
four.
it's the norm. We got used to it. But that's the danger is that we are now at a point where this is normal. And this is why slowly we're getting into four in a cell because we're allowing this and it's not shocking people enough to do anything. But why is this happening? What can we do to stop that? Because three in a cell is not normal, and now we're heading towards four in a cell.
Well, the Mandela rules actually say, uh, this is almost verbatim, it is not desirable to have more than one person
Yeah,
in a cell. Um,
And it's not as though the cells are more like ward cells or, you know what I mean? Like it's not like
yeah.
they're getting larger to
yeah,
accommodate. They're
you
the
know,
same cell.
I think. What we're seeing here is the slow creep of the erosion of the rule of law.
Yeah,
Um, Really, courts have been saying for decades now, this is not acceptable. Uh, Ontario does nothing about it except pack more people in. Um, and so I don't see what conclusion there can be other than this is the erosion of the rule of law. And one of the things I said in the sentencing that I last did was, what happened at Millhaven, that might be an isolated event. The only other event of that nature that comes to mind is what happened at the prison for women back in the 90s. Um, but despite being an isolated event, it's a symptom of something else.
Yeah.
What it
well,
is
like
a
an
symptom of the erosion of the
Edmonton
rule of law.
institution and
Right.
what's
Yes, that
going
as
what
well.
like there's lots of yeah, one of the problems that I find in some of the discussions is everyone likes to speak to what the future will look like, but I'm like, I don't think so because if we talk about it, if we go back to the 1980s, it was better than it is now in our prisons,
Hmm.
even the 90s.
But
So, how do we maintain status quo?
yeah,
And it's not very good.
Is it
but
when you say it was better, sorry, in what sense? Like, were there less people incarcerated, or was the treatment better? How was it better in
Can you
the
imagine back then, even the 90s, early 2000s, like our incarceration rates have constantly increased. But for example, sex offender programming used to be done with a clinical individual doing half the program, a sexologist, someone who understood. Now it's a program officer alone.
so
Like
the
we used to
quality
have.
of the services is going down as well.
It's strained, it's stressed, like how programs work in federal. Even how they treat the program officers. Like if you're a program officer, you literally every 3 years have to tape your entire session, which ruins the dynamic. Can you imagine doing a sex offender program and all the people participating are being audio recorded or video recorded for your evaluation? Then you get assessed on it to maintain your certification, but that takes a long time. They're taping the entire, as I said, sorry, that just astonishes me. But afterwards, it's almost like a race to get reports done. There's a pressure for quantity over quality to make things meet, to make things finish on time. It's just, and the program we know, like again, we're against the backdrop that we know the programs are not meeting all the needs. And we know the people doing it are exhausted and strained. And we also know there's cuts coming
one
and
of
re
the things
envisioning.
One of the things that I've long wondered about and done zero work to satisfy my wondering is the training of the individuals who provide programming in the federal prison. Because I notice in
It's
disclosure
multi
that
week.
it's what?
It's just multi week.
Mm.
There's a separate training for sex offender program officers, a different training for Indigenous program officers, and everyone gets the basic
Well, I see that many programs are delivered by people with the title, I believe, of behavioral specialist or behavioral scientist or something like that. But their
behavioral therapist.
but their credentials are they just have bachelor's degrees.
Yep,
Uh,
they're CPOs. And a correctional program officer in the federal system no longer requires a degree.
so my curiosity is I understand that, for instance, programs are being delivered under the supervision of a psychiatrist.
No,
Uh,
they're not.
But my question is, you have someone overseeing a number of people who are delivering programs. What is the actual qualification and training of the people delivering the programs, and whether the supervising authority is stretched too thin to ensure that the people on the ground are providing quality work?
So they do a lot there, like safeguarders kind of thing, but it's trying to maintain a pretty bad status quo. So you have overworked program officers, CPOs. They just general stuff, go through their training. It's done virtually. That's their qualification. They go in, they deliver the programs. They must be delivered exactly as done. So when you're doing programs, you can have a program participant sitting there chewing on his toenails. That's not a crimogenic risk. They're not supposed to address it. You have a group of prisoners who don't speak English. Their job is to stay like very loyal, faithful, and align with the material. So they don't even have the agency to make it more effective and more to ensure it resonates, right? So the programs and the way they're delivered is challenging in itself, and that's difficult. So they're not clinical psychologists, they're not social workers, they don't have those certifications. I think one of the things that's really important is they should have a prison understanding. Sometimes
Mhm.
we see correctional officers go into program officer roles with time, and it is actually a lateral move between. So there's three jobs. You can be a parole officer, and you can move laterally into programs, or you can move into a position in VAC, like Veteran Affairs Canada. It's like literally your only lateral moves. So sometimes we see someone in parole go to programs and vice versa. So
Mhm.
it's an area requiring much attention. It's an area like the programs themselves need to work. The way people are trained. An example: our Indigenous programs, 50% have to be delivered by an elder.
Mhm. Just 50?
50% by an elder. Most of the Indigenous program officers are also Indigenous.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna
50%
say.
by an elder. That is near impossible.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Every program you got elder. Like are there enough elders in Canada interested even
Mm.
and located close enough to an institution? And then also elders, I don't know if you guys know this, but they're not young. As a result, sometimes delivering the full program over and over again is a little bit much.
Well, and you raised also an interesting point. There's the language issue because if you have, it's fine if you have a program, but if the person who wants to get into the program has a language barrier, I mean, my question is, I wonder if they have interpretation that is available, and if they can provide these interpreters for people who want to do the programs. What is that?
No,
What's the situation?
there's
And
not.
that, well, and that's a big problem as well.
And also, they have to be culturally specific, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Like,
it depends. Putting that aside, because that adds another layer to the problem. But let's just say it's just a basic program that culture for that particular program is not the issue, but language is the issue. So fine, the jail has a program, but if you cannot, if the person cannot benefit from that program due to a language barrier, how is that going to be beneficial? And I'm
oh, it
guessing.
won't
I
be.
mean, it's difficult sometimes to get an interpreter to court. I don't think that they're readily available in a jail, right? Am I
There
wrong
aren't.
about that?
And then the best part is parole ineligibility because you haven't completed your program.
But that's the thing. That's exactly the
No,
point.
but they'll
That
they'll fast forward you through them and put all the pressure on the officer to get him through because they don't want to screw up the parole eligibility.
Sometimes, maybe.
Yeah, no, they will in federal, they will try. And it's all quantity. It's all about numbers. Even in community programming. And it's interesting, yeah, there's a lot of challenges and it needs real focused attention. It really does. And our programs are the foundation. Like I've been in environments where people don't know correctional program officers exist.
Mhm.
I
Hmm.
believe I've said it before, but I've sat in um, very particular academic circles with relevance where I've had people defending that parole officers do programs.
Not the job.
And well, I just sit there and say, no, that's not true.
Mm.
And so
But
what,
people don't know. They're like the ghosts of rehabilitation.
but then what is the solution here? What would you suggest should be done? Like I understand like you're not going to be able to do it, but what is a proposed solution to this problem of the programs and making these circumstances a little bit better for people who are
Everybody. So I did do a report, it's publicly available, and we did a press conference on Parliament Hill in March about programs because they're on the
Mhm.
chopping block with CSC. And in there, there's a good 30-ish recommendations or considerations as well. I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done to the program itself. And then there's also the conditions in which it's delivered, the space in which it's delivered. Like a program programs can't happen in a space that doesn't allow for people to communicate, to talk. You can't sit in like a 40 degrees room with bad lighting and mold and think people are going to open up and feel. Do you know what I mean?
Hmm. Hmm.
But Rose, do you
So
agree that then they should be building more jails for that? Is that the solution?
okay, so I've been thinking about this because right now, rates of incarceration are growing up.
Yeah.
Violence is going up.
Mhm.
More people are getting incarcerated. That requires a lot to figure out how to fix, how to work. But at the same time, in Ottawa, for example, you have the NO project, the No for Prison expansion. I don't know how that helps because if we don't expand, we're quadruple bunking. What are we going to do? Like, I don't even like quintuplet bunking in the future. So, um, how do we put that together? Like, what do we do in that space? And one of the things I was thinking is because there's always protesting, nobody wants to build the prisons, everyone wants to decarcerate and this and that, but we can't just do these things. And I'm not sure if you guys have noticed, but we also have an unhoused problem.
Mhm.
So, not really sure how decarcerating helps with that. And I was thinking, what if the prisons that were being built were redesigned to be repurposable buildings? So, for example, it's a community center with a complex. And we decarcerate, we do a good job, we get people out. That becomes a lovely community center for the neighborhood, a series of apartments, subsidized housing, anything, whatever, right? But like repurpose. I don't know what you can. I'm not an architect. I have no idea. But like, there's got to be ways to build things so they are repurposable.
So meaning the same jails that we have, maybe restructure them in a different
No, I'm
way.
saying build. If we build new ones,
Right. But
because you can't
isn't it
change what's there.
okay? No, you don't think that we can like they can also maybe spend money on what they already have, the structures that are already there, and just rebuild them differently, redesign them in a different way, as opposed to just building more physical jails.
Well, I think the prisons that exist, I think financially to be able to do that, plus the timing and all that, I can't see them redoing units, right? And restructuring and redesigning and all that. I'd see them doing extensions or add-ons if there's land. That's what HMP is, 3 layers of prisons all in one. Um, but I think one of the things that we really need to look at is with prison growth, because we do not have enough space for the people who are in there, is a more palatable way to expand, to actually expand with repurposable buildings. So the expansion is actually temporary. And it would be more temporary if you're in a community who wants whatever that building is going to be for the community. Then you want to do stuff to help get the people out so everybody wins. I don't know. It's just one of those harebrained ideas. How do you make conditions of confinement more palatable? And we should be investing in the people incarcerated. They
Mhm.
should have resources, they should have things, there should be opportunities to relax, to get your mind off everything that's happening, to manage the stress, to go to school, to get
Well, that's the
programs.
thing, because that's the other question that I wanted to ask you guys. Like, are whatever programs that they do have available, are they efficient? Are they really helping people rehabilitate or acquire new skills and just get back and reintegrate into society? Or is this just hypothetical and really they're not helping them at all with anything?
The only thing I would say there is most correctional program officers, when they feel they have helped someone do well, make change, figure something out, blah, 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 those are the perks of their career.
Mhm.
So it's not that it doesn't happen, but I don't know the percentage in which it
Right.
does happen. It doesn't seem super high.
Well, that's the thing, because that's also important information that we need to know. I mean, we do hear sometimes of some individuals who do work a lot on themselves while they're incarcerated. They get out and they've completely transformed their lives. And those are good stories to hear. But my
I think it
question,
happens a lot too.
okay, so So the programs are effective. Do you think that whatever skills or programs they have are actually helping them, or it depends on the person or the people who are providing these and teaching them and giving the programs?
I wrote a chapter on programs in a book, but it's from 2014, 2015, so I don't know if that still is like a valid response. I don't necessarily feel the programs are meeting their goals in many ways. I don't think they're designed with the intention that those goals can be even met. One of the big challenges is a person has to be ready
Mhm.
for a program. You have to be ready to change. And, people don't like to say it, but prison is also for many, as Senator Passeri said, called it a temporary refuge. It's a place to get clean. It's a place to have a roof over your head, to get meals, to figure your stuff out. It's kind of, you think about it, sometimes it's like a rehab center for people who can't afford it.
Mhm.
It's also long term living for people who have special needs at times.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
social welfare. It's under a welfare system and it catches people who fall through the cracks.
Well, that's one of the things that I learned from going to Grand Valley, which again is the women's prison. A number of women expressed relief at being there because they couldn't be, tormented and abused and so on by men.
Safe.
They're able to take a breath of, take a breath in safety. Um, but these are all multifaceted. There's many, many layers to all these questions.
Yeah.
I have heard many times from many incarcerated women that the first healthy relationship they've ever had with a man has been a male primary worker.
In the prison.
Not a relationship about sex, about manipulation,
Yeah.
about this, about that, not violent, not that, feeling respected. And what really stood out to me is I remember the particular individual who first said it. Without that, she would have never known what a healthy relationship looks like because she had nothing to model it on.
Mhm. Going back to the question of building new prisons, um, I I think what ought to be studied more is what happens at bail hearings. And I haven't done a bail hearing in quite some time. Were I to do a bail hearing, I would raise all sorts of issues about the Mandela rules and about the conditions that one is likely to experience. And, going back again to what Justice Jones said in the Bassi decision, human rights crisis. How can we, uh, you know, issue a warrant remanding someone into a human rights crisis? So the way that I would approach the question of building more jails would be, how are we justifying bails? I spend a lot of time thinking about that on the back end at sentencing, but I spend virtually no time thinking about it at the front end. And I hope someone is thinking about it this way, and
Let's
perhaps
look at it,
adopting
but
me.
think of what's happening with bail in Ontario.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Everyone's just going to prison now. Like,
Yes.
Well, that's the thing. That's the dichotomy here is that we're having stricter bail rules, so which means that it's very likely we're going to have more people who are going to be detained at the pre-trial stage. So it's causing a lot of
it's
inconsistencies.
increasing, right?
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
at the same time, if we don't expand, we're putting them in worse and worse conditions. So I'm not saying expanding is necessary and a good thing at
Mhm.
all. I just people can't live the way they are. So it's wrong.
One
So
of
that's
the
why I was
things
thinking repurposable buildings.
One of the things, we may have discussed this last time, but in my role as an advocate, I'm involved in a us versus them contest, as I think any lawyer is. One of the things I've learned from Rose is looking at the situation a lot more holistically and thinking about how jail staff, their needs and interests factor in as well. And through that lens, I am constantly provided with material by none other than Doug Ford, who it seems on a weekly basis says something negative about the bad people that has this boomerang effect on his own staff. The most recent being of the new jail in Thunder Bay. He said something to the effect of prisoner or criminals don't deserve a place this fancy. Okay, so do does your staff not deserve a place, a good working environment? Do they deserve to work in Toronto South? Like what tell us,
Oh,
Doug.
I have it's so bad because my mouth can go sometimes, but I was in a press conference one and I said, well, HMP is a government building. So why don't we just switch? Prisoners go use Confederation, government ministers go use HMP. Because if that's your government building,
Confederation being the legislature,
no, the Confederation building.
but it's
I'm
the House of
pointing at it
Government.
with my hand. It's really not helpful.
But it's the House of Government for Newfoundland and Labrador, yes.
Yeah. So it's like a tall, beautiful building. So, like, okay, that's a government building. And then again, it comes back to this like, how can we as Canadians be okay with this as a country?
Well, and I think that's the most important point here that I think we want people to be aware of is that we shouldn't be okay with what's going on right now and how the situation is and the status quo and accepting this, and that something should be done so that things will change. And I think public awareness is really important. And that's why I really appreciate the fact that we're having these discussions. And I hope that we can continue them just because it's really important for people to understand that public interest in these issues are really very important. And that's why it's important to be aware of what's happening in the jails and how bad things are. Um,
I think that the number one thing that the public can latch onto and take hold of is the rule of law. And in my view, and I might be wrong about this, but my critique of sentencing is that every sentence to some degree results in an erosion of the rule of law when you have people who have been in horrific confinement conditions that are sort of being, we put on paper that we don't accept these, that we're better than these, that this is awful, but we still do it and we still sentence people from those conditions. So it's allowed to exist. And I think the average Canadian should be concerned about the damage that does to the rule of law. And that affects everyone.
Agreed.
The Constitution is something that we all have to safeguard. And that is something that Canadians should be really worried about. They don't need to worry about jail conditions because they're bad conditions. They need to worry about the vitality of the constitutional order in this country.
I couldn't agree more. And I also find there is a need, like, if you think about health, we're governed by hospitals, healthcare, what keeps us safe, well, to all this kind of stuff. Our safety, which enables us to be healthy, is governed by law. Yet it seems like the structures that deliver and enact it and enable it and keep safety in place, those arms of justice, are just flailing.
Yes. And I mean, in a way, if we want our societies to be safe, then we want to make sure that the jails are also safe and good environments that are helping people who are there so that, we don't have people who escape, let's say, from prison or who, when they get out, are worse or are not contributing to society. So it is really important to how they're experiencing their incarceration or their time in detention. And again, just like we said, because it's also not just impacting that person, but also the people around them and the people who are close to them. And they have nothing to do with the criminal justice system in many cases.
Imagine how worrisome it would be if like, all that, well, you see all those prison chat groups when they have someone, a loved one inside, and it's so worrisome. It's complete stress all the time. And
Yeah,
knowing the conditions, knowing all those things, the stresses are significant and they don't dissipate and they don't get easier.
yeah.
And it's hard too because support systems are essential to everything. And we have people incarcerated who are removed from their support system. They come out, and there is that in like the stigma, that identity and that will dissipate with time. But there's also self stigma because you were in prison, you anticipate a reaction. So it takes people time
Yeah.
to get over that and to disassociate with that part of their former experience. So, and then in this way, we're causing all these different layers of harm. And when you're inside, so you spend 20 years inside and you develop your own network, your own group of supports, the people who got you through, who helped you rehabilitate, reform, change, right? You get out that door, you're not allowed to talk to them anymore. You have no support. If you're estranged from your family, now you're estranged from the people who've been your family
That's
for the last
true.
20 years.
That's true.
It's ridiculous. You can't even from a halfway house take the car together if you're going to work at the same place. Cannot interact outside the halfway house.
Mhm.
So I don't understand how we anticipate anyone's going to be okay.
Well, on that pessimistic
Very
note, Rose,
sad.
a very sad note, which
Enjoy your weekend.
yeah, I mean, I really don't like to end things on a sad note, but it is a very sad topic. But again, I think it's important to keep talking about these issues and to raise awareness because people need to understand that this is really important. And again, I mean, prisons are a reflection, they're a part of our country, and how people are treated in prison is giving a very bad image about our country, sadly, and we don't want that. So,
No,
I,
but we do deserve it right now.
mhm. Yeah, I mean, it's not going well at all, right now. Um, but in any event, both of you I know are working really hard in this area, and I'm very happy that I got to chat with you again to talk more about these issues. And we have to just keep talking about this so that it becomes really important and so that we can end. I really hope that the three in a cell is not going to be the norm anymore, and that it will shock people when they hear that there are three in a cell, as opposed to just, oh, okay, yeah. I mean, that's the situation across the province.
And
Mhm.
Maya, you bring up something really, really important because as long as we don't, there's multiple things. There's people who are considered able to speak a prison, like someone who has experienced prison can then speak a prison. But if we don't normalize it, so everyone is aware and speaks of it, no one's ever going to really understand because it's still such a thing that most people have no clue about and don't talk about.
Yeah.
And I worry too that if we give only certain people the authority to speak to it, it can never just be commonplace.
Mhm.
And you see that in many groups who are diverse by restricting who can do work, who can talk about it, who can do these things. You're othering because you're making a group that's small and only they can do it's not normalized, it's not part of society. So I think we really need to be more open about prison in order for it to be more commonplace to talk about so it's no longer othered and the people involved won't be othered, if that
Yeah,
makes sense.
Mhm. Mhm.
that's a good point. Jeffrey, any final comment that you want to make?
I just want to reiterate what I said about, the Constitution. You don't have to care about people in prison. You don't have to like people in prison. You don't have to find a self-interest that you can align with anyone in prison, and you don't have to excuse them for what they did. But you do have to take seriously that if you want to live in a country in which everyone is equal before the law and in which all public authority is rooted in the law. That's not happening right now, and that's what you need to be worried about because prisoners, as I see it, are kind of their rights are the bulwark of our society, and if we start eroding on different people's rights in recognition as human beings, then for the rest of us, that's something that everyone needs to be concerned about.
That's a really good point. And also, it reflects the reason why people may not think about human rights when it comes to people who are in custody is because they are treated like they're not like us. They're different kind of people, which is wrong to start with because you don't lose your humanity because you're in prison. And I think it's just also this idea that we have to remember that they're human beings, no matter what brought them there. They don't lose their human rights because of that, and they shouldn't.
Mm.
So maybe we'll talk about that sometime soon. But thank you so much again, you guys, for taking the time. I always enjoy chatting with you, and hopefully,
Likewise.
I hope that one day we'll have a happy discussion about jail and
Yeah.
prison.
Right.
So far, it's
Yes.
We
not
can
looking,
definitely do that.
yeah,
There's
Yeah.
good things too, right?
yeah, hopefully soon. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.